Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul. In this video we're breaking down Night of the Living Dead. Released in 1968, Night of the Living Dead was a pivotal moment in horror movie history. Night brought a new kind of zombie into the light and basically invented the concept of the modern day zombie. Written and directed by a man who's seen as the godfather of the genre, George A. Romero completely changed the game. Penned alongside John Russo, they crafted a tale in which we follow a group of survivors trapped in a farmhouse surrounded by the dead. Now, Night of the Living Dead is not only a classic, but it remains a significant part of film history for many different reasons. From its messaging, to its cast, to its visual depictions of violence, it exposed audiences to the idea that your closest friends and neighbours could be monsters. Throughout this video, we're going to be breaking down all the hidden details and behind the scenes moments that make Night of the Living Dead just so groundbreaking. Hope you enjoy it as we go through the movie, and if you do, you know what to do. Anyway, with that out of the way, thank you for clicking this. Now let's get into Night of the Living Dead.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Okay, so before getting into the film itself, I want to talk about the movie's history and a theory that I have. Before getting to that though, I need to lay the groundwork for how this movie came to be made. Okay, so alongside friend and business partner Russell Striner, George A. Romero began his career shooting remote shots for Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. It's here that I think he got the bug for turning a neighborhood into a horror site and may have imagined survivors holed up in a house. That's the theory. We don't know if that's confirmed, but what we do know is that he wanted to capitalize on the industry's thirst for the bizarre. The pair then recruited their friend John Russo to help them craft their horror picture. Now, the movie itself was actually originally going to be a horror comedy about teenage aliens. However, the idea was scrapped when they realized they wouldn't have the budget to build a convincing looking spaceship. Another early draft had the monsters attacking humans as aliens or humans possessed by an alien virus before they then decided on them simply being dead. Some of this does still make it to the film though, namely the news report about the NASA satellite from Venus leaking radiation. What I love though is that it's never stated as to what the definitive cause of the outbreak is. To cut costs, Russo also had the idea to center the movie around a young man who discovers aliens stealing human corpses for food. This was the eureka moment for Romero and Russo. They combined the idea with one of Romero's unpublished short stories about flesh-eating ghouls to create an entirely new movie monster to terrify audiences with. Now, those zombies had existed in the past. They hadn't been like what we get here. Heavily inspired by the vampire creatures from Richard Matheson's I Am Legend in the 1962 Carnival of Souls, Romero molded these concepts to bring the horror closer to home and make us the monsters. I thought I was creating a completely new monster. The neighbors suddenly turn into flesh eaters. Ghouls, that's what I called them. What I was really saying is when there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth. Matheson and Romero had a playful sort of rivalry over the similarities, with Matheson calling Night of the Living Dead kind of cornball and more theft than homage. However, Romero argued that Matheson wrote about the aftermath of a complete global upheaval, but Night of the Living Dead, that explored how people would respond to that kind of disaster as it developed. With their ghoul story established, the trio then pitched their idea to the Hardman Associates film firm to bring them on board as investors. Signing on, they then created the Image 10 production company to produce the film. Beginning with a budget of $6,000, this was pooled together by each member of the production company chipping in $600 each. Romero was then able to secure 10 more investors for an additional of $6,000. Now, this was just enough to begin filming, but not enough to complete it. Production had to stop multiple times so Romero could show footage to new investors. Ultimately, the film raised $114,000, which is roughly $1 million today. To put this into perspective, the budget for the original Halloween was nearly triple at $300,000, and a typical Hollywood budget today hits roughly in the $100 million range. So yeah, to say that they were working on a tight budget is a big understatement. Romero described the process as everyone just pitching in and doing their part, with much of the cast being made up of friends and family. This also included Carl Hardman and Marilyn Eastman, who actually owned Hardman Associates. They played Harry and Helen Cooper, with Hardman's daughter Kyra playing their daughter Karen. There's loads more about the production and the innovative ways Romero and the team were able to work around this insanely low budget, and we'll go through that as we go through the movie. But yeah, aside all that, there was an insane mistake that basically caused a shit ton of issues and made it near impossible for this film to make the money that it should have. At one point during the release, the title was changed from Night of the Flesh Eaters to Night of the Living Dead. However, when they changed the title, the copyright notice was deleted and thus the film entered public domain upon its release. So no copyright on this film at all. What this meant is that anyone could distribute it, make remakes, spin-off sequels, and even YouTube videos without ever getting hit with a copyright notice. So this is why we had so many of those dead films following after it, and unfortunately Romero didn't have a leg to stand on legally. Now I think overall things probably worked out, and we will talk about how much it actually made, but I also think it helped to act as a launch pad for him to make his following films. I kind of took it as like, well, it was a lot of promotion, and then Dawn of the Dead was absolutely massive. He'd then help remake the film in the 90s and at least make money from that, but yeah, I can imagine that was completely devastating, and pretty much every zombie film that followed owes everything to him. We will of course be covering Dawn and Day as well, and I also just got the 4K for the remake of Night, so make sure you subscribe for all of those. But it also means we can use as much footage as we want without getting a copyright strike. Play the entire movie! But yes, we will be going through this 4K version, which looks fantastic and was actually restored by George Lucas. Now, we open the film with Barbara and Johnny driving through a cemetery to visit their father's grave. What I love about the film is that it gets you attached to these characters from the off, and then you assume that you'll follow them throughout the movie. Johnny obviously gets killed in the intro, and Barbara kind of disappears when the focus shifts to Ben. This is something that they alter massively for the remake, with Bob being way less than a damsel in distress who's just like, well, talking shit the whole film. The opening scene was also shot in a real cemetery located in Butler County, Pennsylvania. Known as Evans City Cemetery, this is now a popular tourist attraction. This location was chosen by Romero and the team because not only was it free, but it's also located on top of a hill, which they figured would give them privacy from the police coming to shut them down. And what's another example of making things work on such a small budget, the car we see Barbara and Johnny driving was also owned by the mother of Russell Striner, who plays Johnny. The car also got a dent during the shooting, so Romero rewrote the scene to have the car crash into a tree when Barbara tries to escape, which is genius. The main theme plays as the opening credits roll as well, which was composed by Spencer Moore and titled The Eerie Heavy Echo. Not having money or time to worry about things like creating a score, all the music used in the movie was mixed or modified from Capitol EMI Records' public domain library. This included the opening theme, and this was also used in 1956 episode of Gumby the Magic Show, and also the 1959 film Teenagers from Outer Space. Now the film takes place in April, but this opening sequence was shot in the middle of November, so the actors had to hold their breath to avoid it appearing on camera. Another fun fact about the cemetery, because I know you love fun facts about cemeteries, after filming was done, a tornado hit the locale and uprooted the trees. This brought up 200 bodies to the surface, which felt extremely ironic, and Romero even jokingly asked if they walked. Ha ha ha! As the car enters the cemetery, we can also see the sign for the entrance is full of bullet holes. This was an actual sign for the cemetery and was not a prop made for the film. Gotta love rural Pennsylvania. Now while this was a happy accident, I think it retroactively becomes an indication to the audience of the danger that we and the characters are heading into. It can also be seen as an early sign, little wordplay there, that the ghoul invasion has already started and that people have been fending them off. When Barbara and Johnny reach their father's gravesite, Johnny's annoyed that they're there at all, as he doesn't even remember what their father looks like. Little continuity error here as well. Before getting out the car, we can see Johnny take off his driving gloves and throw them on the dashboard. However, we later see him take them out of his pockets at the cemetery.
Boy, I really hope somebody got fired for that blunder.
But yeah, like we talked about, this was an insanely small budget that they were working with, so I'm not pointing these things out to be like a gotcha, but it is funny that the actors had to hold their breath in order to not mess with the continuity of the film, but they didn't notice this. This video is sponsored by Squarespace. So as I mentioned on a couple of videos, I actually started out as a web designer before becoming world famous #1 YouTuber Kevin Spoilers. Actually did a graduate apprenticeship, built sites for lots of companies across a wide range of businesses, and eventually launched my own review website, which is what got me into making videos here on YouTube. Little origin story for you there. The job involved lots of coding, having to learn complex design language and styles, and just hours upon hours of work getting things to even like a first draft stage. If you've tried to build a website yourself without much knowledge, then you'll know how much of a nightmare that it is. However, Squarespace makes everything easy, and within an hour you can have a gorgeous looking website that's ready to show to the world. With Squarespace's design intelligence, anyone can create a stunning, fully personalized website tailored exactly to their needs, with absolutely no expertise required. All you have to do is answer a few questions about your brand and your goals, and then pick from professionally crafted templates, and boom, you've got a bespoke digital identity ready to go across your whole online presence. It's all customizable too with their drag and drop editor. So tweaking fonts, colors, the layout, or adding new products and sections feels completely effortless. It's all straightforward and stress-free, and Squarespace makes the hard work easy. Plus, if you're selling anything, whether it be physical products, merch, digital downloads, or subscriptions, you can do it all through Squarespace. Showcase your items with rich listings, high-quality images, embedded videos, customer reviews, related products, add-ons, you name it, it's there. Managing inventory, orders, customers, and sales is simple and built right in. Print shipping labels directly from the platform, set up flexible rates, handle payments seamlessly, and even get tools for taxes and payouts. It saves you serious time so you can just focus on growing your business. Head over to squarespace.com for a free trial right now where there's no commitment needed. When you're ready to launch your site or grab a domain, go to squarespace.com/heavyspoilers and use the code HEAVYSPOILERS to save 10% off your first purchase. Just remember squarespace.com/heavyspoilers and use the code HEAVYSPOILERS to save 10% off your first purchase and make an impact on the web today. Thanks. Before Johnny gets out of the car, we hear a quick announcement on the radio that they're back after technical problems. However, Johnny quickly turns it off. We just have these little constant clues that something's not right, but the pair keep ignoring the signs. Excuse the pun there. The voice in the radio is also played by Cole Hodman, who of course plays Harry Cooper later in the film. As they walk to their father's grave, Johnny continues to complain and comments on how there's no one else around and that the flowers they put last year are gone. This is never explained in the movie, but maybe Barbara and Johnny's dad has also risen from the grave, which honestly would have been a really cool and creepy twist here. They were probably just shifted, but yeah, this scene kind of paints out Johnny as a dick. He clearly has no respect for the dead, whereas Barbara is quiet and reserved.
I haven't seen you in church lately.
He also doesn't respect religion, which in the 60s was seen as a big no-no. Plus, he's also like a dick to this really chill zombie guy who's just stumbling through the graveyard. I think though this kind of plays into his hubris and how his arrogance means that he joins them, whereas at this point she makes it out. Standing by the grave, Johnny then tells a story about how he used to scare Barbara when they were kids, and then gives us the infamous line,
"They're coming to get you, Barbara."
Which is just one of those things that you instantly think about when you think about this movie. He then starts chasing her through the cemetery, uttering the lines that scared her as a kid.
You're ignorant.
"They're coming for you, Barbara."
Now, I couldn't find anything really significant about the line or who wrote it, but it just seems to be an instance of something random really connecting with the audience, especially with that voice. Not only is it the most iconic line of the film, but it also foreshadows how the dead really are coming for Barbara literally in this moment. Now, a lot of people have criticized how Barbara was portrayed in the film, with her basically just freaking out and standing in silence the whole time and mumbling and stuff. However, I think the story her brother tells us gives us a bit more perspective on the later actions that she takes. He says that the cemetery always scared her, which is why he would play tricks on her. This shows that Barbara has always had a fear of the dead or death itself, so when the ghouls begin to rise from their graves, it's literally her worst nightmare come to life, which would petrify anybody. I think a lot of people will miss this subtle line, as the conversation doesn't really have any significance other than setting us up for the attack by the zombie. Speaking of which, it's in this moment that it then lunges forward and we get our first on-screen zombie as we know them today. Now, since this is our first look at the zombie or ghouls, I figure this is a good time to touch upon some zombie lore before moving on to the next scene. While this film created the modern day concept of zombies, the reanimated corpses in films are never actually called the Z word. This was something started by fans, and Romero just accepted it. Thus, going forward, the ghouls were referred to as zombies in Dawn of the Dead, and so on and so forth. As we touched upon earlier though, Romero didn't create the concept of the dead rising from the grave. The concept of a zombie or zombie originated in Haitian voodoo culture between the 16th and 19th centuries. Also, messed up there and called it voodoo, it's actually voodoo, and I want to point out that that's not the same as voodoo. While voodoo derives its name from the Haitian voodoo, the name is largely rooted in ignorance of the spelling of voodoo, which I also messed up as well, so apologies for that. This has all kind of been lumped in together along with the racist connotations of voodoo being evil and the practice of dark magic. However, the meaning of the voodoo spelling has changed over time, and today it's used to refer to the New Orleans distinct practice of the religion known as Louisiana voodoo. This evolved from voodoo when Haitian refugees came to Louisiana after the Haitian Revolution in 1803. Considered one of the most misunderstood religions in the world, voodoo can be traced to West African legends. Now, they believe that the soul is divided into two separate parts. These are the little good angel and the big good angel. Though it's open to interpretation, it's basically taken that the big good angel, that controls a person's motor functions, while the little angel is what constitutes the person's memories, intelligence, and also their personality. When someone dies, the two parts of the soul don't immediately cross over to the afterlife and are at risk of becoming lost or captured. It's believed that someone who uses voodoo for malicious intent can steal the big angel of a recently deceased person and trap it into a vessel. This will then put them entirely under the control of their master, and they'll become a zombie. Alternative tellings of the legend also involve the body itself being turned into a zombie, where the priest steals the little angel, leaving the body an empty shell that can then be manipulated. This version seems to be more in line with what we think of as zombies, and they're unable to feel pain or emotion and are just like completely devoid of any kind of intelligence or personality. Where things differ is in those tellings, they're mindless slaves to the priests that created them, and they don't eat the flesh of the living. One of the major differences between what we think of as zombie and the zombie, though, is that Haitians didn't fear the zombie themselves, but were afraid of becoming one. Many see the legend of the zombie as a metaphor for slavery, with the Haitians fearing becoming people without choice or autonomy. The legends of the Haitian zombie then made its way to America in 1915 when the US occupied Haiti and brought back stories of people's practices in voodoo. We actually touched upon this when we covered Live and Let Die and how Baron Samedi was said to control zombies in the book. Where it really got attention though was in the 1929 William Seabrook's book, The Magic Island. In it, he described dead men working with expressionless blank eyes, almost like corpses. The book has been blasted since and is seen as basically being the reason that voodoo is seen as being evil and all the negative connotations that people have with black magic. It's unclear when the transition from zombie to zombie happened, but it's likely linked to the 1932 film White Zombie. This was based on Seabrook's book, and it starred Bela Lugosi as an evil voodoo priest from Haiti. The film has become a sort of cult classic in the zombie genre, but it also further pushed those stereotypes to the mainstream. Now, Russo denied ever hearing about the zombies and said that when he crafted the ghouls, he thought they were a completely new creature. He made a story that turned neighbors into flesh eaters, and it wasn't really based around the religion or ritualistic practices. So while the idea of the undead has been around for a long time, it really was Night of the Living Dead that created zombies as we understand them today. Whew. Now, I know that was a bit of a history dump, but I think it's important not only from a cultural standpoint of something that is very much misunderstood, but it also highlights just how groundbreaking Night of the Living Dead was for the time of its release. I also think I'd be remiss for not mentioning the 30th anniversary edition of the movie, which actually includes additional scenes that were shot for that release. This includes a brand new opening in which we learn a lot about the origins of this zombie. Turns out the guy was a child killer who'd just been executed, and men from the prison drive the body up to the cemetery where the family of one of his victims talk about how they just want to make sure he's dead. He obviously comes alive and stuff, and yeah, they even got the original actor back for it. We then drive off and we cut to Barbara and Johnny arriving at the cemetery. Other scenes include some people in a wreck coming alive and basically the origins of the horde that surrounds the house. We also get an additional news report where the zombie from the start's hunted, and a preacher who is giving his funeral tries to stop him by quoting Bible verses. He gets bitten, and the dad of the girl he killed returns with his spade to take down the zombie. The edition also has a different ending where we join the Reverend 1 year later to see that he's still got his bite mark. For some reason, he's not becoming a zombie, which he chalks up to having a higher purpose. He's got a dog that he says protects others from him turning, and they've been researching his DNA for a cure. He starts rattling off a sermon about how he's the Lord's chosen one, and so on and so forth. It's nothing I think you need to go out of your way to watch, and I think the ending kind of ruins the severity of Ben's death. But yeah, we are completionists at the channel, so I had to go back and watch that. Now as the ghoul begins attacking Barbara, Johnny jumps into action to save his sister and wrestles with the monster. As Barbara runs away, she hides behind a gravestone reading Nicholas Kramer, 1842 to 1917. This was an actual grave from the cemetery as they didn't have the budget to make prop gravestones. Now why I'm telling you this is because the grave's become an iconic piece of the movie and fans have tracked down the real Nicholas Kramer to show their respects. He fought for the Union in the American Civil War and was actually a police officer for Evans City, Pennsylvania. He then died of pneumonia in 1917 and a storm in the 80s actually knocked over Kramer's grave. Luckily though, fans Christian Stavrakis and Dave Burrion restored the headstone to its original place in 1990. So yeah, shout out to Nicholas Kramer, I wish you could have risen from the grave to enjoy your fame. Now in the fight, Johnny hits his head on one of the gravestones, pretty much killing him instantly. The ghoul then gets back up and starts coming for Barbara, who runs back to their car but trips just before she's able to reach it. Now I couldn't find a clear answer on if this is the first instance of someone tripping while running away from a killer in a horror movie, but it's one of the common tropes in every slasher movie and I wouldn't be surprised if this is where it originated. But let me know your thoughts below. Barbara is then able to get up and she makes it to the car but realizes she doesn't have the keys. Locking all the doors, the ghoul begins to slam on the car, trying to get to her until grabbing a brick and smashing the window. Romero was actually the one operating the camera in the scene and was almost hit with a brick when the ghoul smashes the window. The scene also shows us one of the defining characteristics of Romero's zombies, as they're not completely mindless and are able to use tools to some capacity. Romero had a very clear set of rules for what makes a zombie and yeah, he's got some quite fantastic quotes around them. He said,
"Zombies cannot run. So anyone who has a zombie running, don't listen to that person. Their ankles would snap. I mean, you know, what did they do? Go and join a spa the moment they rose from the dead? Give me a break. They're dead."
I mean, he's got a legitimate point there, and yeah, I'm sick of those guys who have zombies running. It needs to be realistic. When the dead rise from the ground, they better not be running. That's disgraceful. Barbara then rolls down the hill to escape and hits the tree because we needed to explain that bump. Poor Mrs. Steiner. I really hope she was compensated for the car because I would be very pissed if my son crashed my car not once but twice while messing around with his friends. You can also see that the car barely even scrapes the side of the tree, but the dent is huge. Barbara then flees to the farmhouse where we spend the rest of the movie. This was actually loaned to Romero and the crew by the owner, who was planning on demolishing the house. The production team then completely renovated it to make it seem livable, and this was just so they could tear it down throughout the film. First thing they did was clean up the kitchen, and this was so they had a nice place to have lunch at. By the end, they had 7 members of the crew actually living there while making the film, and yeah, to be fair, when they go in, it does look like a nice house. Once inside, Barbara then grabs a knife from the kitchen and checks the place room to room. We get a jump scare with some animal heads on the wall, which symbolizes how death is all around them, both inside and out the house. It's something I always remember noticing throughout Resident Evil, especially that first one, and they definitely took a lot of inspiration from this film. To the point that Romero was even in talks to direct those films. But then we wouldn't have had the fucking slow motion spin and kicking a dog, George, you hack! Ghouls then start to surround the grounds, and Barbara finds a dead body at the top of the stairs. Its face has been eaten off, and the mutilated head was made by Romero himself, who used ping pong balls for the eyes. Nice bit of trivia that. Couldn't confirm this as well, but this is probably either a real head or some kind of animal head, as one of the investors for the film was a butcher and they provided the real animal parts for a lot of the intense scenes. This includes the later scenes where the zombies are chowing down on Tom and Judy, which was reportedly roasted ham covered in chocolate syrup, which was as disgusting as it sounds apparently. The idea that Tara has transformed the landscape also hits us when she tries to exit the property. Just 40 seconds earlier in the scene it had been broad daylight, but now we see that it's night. Terrified by the corpse, she then decides to take her chances with the ghouls, and it's here that we're introduced to our other main character, Ben. He then takes her back inside, and we begin
The Night of the Living Dead.
He said it! He said it!
Now I think we'd be remiss for not talking about Dwayne Jones, who plays Ben in the film. This marked the first time a black actor was made the star and hero of a horror film. While there had been horror films centering around black actors, such as Mantin Moreland in 1941's King of the Zombies, they were never the stars. Interestingly, the original script did have Ben as a white truck driver, with the role originally being meant for Rudy Ritchie. However, Romero cast Jones instead because he was simply the best actor to audition. Despite the change in casting, Romero and Russo didn't change the script and stated that the same things were going to happen if the actor was white. Now, though it wasn't intentional, being written and shot during the civil rights era of the 60s, that meant the film instantly became political. Racial tensions were at an all-time high, and it's impossible to talk about this film without talking about how it was viewed at the time. Romero was not actually that concerned about Ben being black either, and thought it was fine if they just didn't change the script. However, Jones was very aware of how he'd be perceived and insisted on numerous lines being rewritten to make the character come off as less angry. He even asked to give Ben more sophisticated dialogue and a much more clean-cut wardrobe. Speaking on the subject, Romero even said, Dwayne was very concerned and almost the only one who was concerned about him being black. He said he didn't want to look gruff and wanted to be presentable. We were like, come on man, it's 1968, we're all past that. Little did we know. Romero has since reflected that he probably should have taken Jones' concerns more into consideration, particularly the scene where he slaps Barbara. Romero insists, though, that though he never drew a connection at the time between Jones and the civil rights movement, he did acknowledge that he may have unconsciously thought of those themes. According to Daniel Krause, the co-author of the 2020 Night of the Living Dead novel, Romero consciously shot Living Dead in the style of news footage inspired by photographs and news coverage of protesters being beaten by police. While claiming it was unintentional at the time, Romero would later clarify that it also wasn't necessarily an accident either. Because of that, the film has also become a moment that's celebrated as being one of those defining points in black representation. There's been lots of books over the years that have talked about how it was probably no coincidence that a movie created in the 60s would centre around violent, brain-dead people that would invade your home. It also came out in a time set against the context of Martin Luther King's assassination and had a black character punching a white man, which could represent the white patriarchy. Ben's fate, of course, also takes on a completely different connotation due to the character's race, and we'll talk about that later in the breakdown. But I do think it holds some significant weight, given the history of zombies and its relation to Haitian voodoo, that a black man is the hero of the movie, which redefined the term away from its misunderstood association. Especially as black characters were normally either victims or ones responsible for creating monsters in most of the tellings before this. Again, we'll touch upon this a little bit more at the end of the film, but it really can't be overstated just how important Jones's casting was to not only the success of Living Dead, but from the impact that it had on the film industry as a whole, and I think it's one of the many reasons why the film still resonates today. And yeah, I don't know if the movie would have been as discussed as it was had Ben just been your white stereotypical redneck, which is what they originally wanted. Also, if you want to support the channel and look good doing it, then definitely check out our Night of the Living Dead inspired shirts at the merch store below. Sheridan has absolutely knocked out the park on these. Their designs are incredible, and yeah, if you pick up one of these, pick up a couple more, you'll get more and more of a discount and save more money. You will look fantastic too. Anyway, back to the movie, and inside the house, Ben immediately takes charge and starts making a plan for their escape. Unluckily for him, Barbara is completely checked out from sheer terror. Not even able to answer any of his questions, she's just staring off into nothing. This is the moment the movie really switches over to Ben as the main character, as Barbara remains comatose for pretty much the rest of the film. At the time, a lot of films suffered from very shit writing when it came to female characters. Look at Dr. No, for example. However, the character of Barbara was originally quite strong and more of a survival partner to Ben. It was only when making it that the character was changed because Romero liked Judith O'Dea's performance more when she was terrified. So they said, yeah, just do that the entire time. Unfortunately, this was a criticism levied against the film, and the 90s remake returned things to her original version, with Romero even calling it his apology to women. Barbara gets a lot of shit moving forward, because she doesn't really do anything, but the actress behind her did come to her defense and give her interpretation of the character. Barbara had to retreat into her own mind to cope with what was going on, but she would eventually get over the trauma and help everyone. Now, while it's kind of hard to get this from the movie, I think this explanation fits with the line that we talked about earlier. This is just her response to being confronted by her biggest fear. The theme of being confronted with fear and how someone responds to it can also apply to all the characters in the film. In opposite to her, Ben's response is to take charge and help whoever he can. On the opposite side of the spectrum, we have Harry Cooper, who we meet later. Driven by the fear of losing his family, he's completely self-interested and acts like a coward. The response to fear becomes the central theme of the whole film, as it's what prevents the characters from being able to work together against the ghouls. On the flip side of this, They possess no fear at all and all work together as a gang to get what they want, even if they're not doing it consciously. Something that they explore more in the 90s version though is how you could just easily walk around the zombies. However, as a collective unit, they're almost insurmountable and we see the heroes lose because they refuse to work together. One quick fact about Barbara as well. Romero originally wanted to cast Betty Albelin, who played Lady Albelin in Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Mr. Rogers wouldn't allow her to do it though, but he did, however, enjoy the film and its sequel, Dawn of the Dead. Now more ghouls arrive and smash the lights on the ride outside, again demonstrating some sort of intelligence. Ben then gives them the all 1-2 with a tire iron, and this would be the first real melee weapon used against a zombie. Tire irons, wrenches, bits of wood with nails on them, baseball bats, stuff. They all became staples of weapons in zombie stuff, and it all kind of springs out from this moment. And yeah, as much as I love guns, yeehaw! I have to admit, in zombie stuff, I actually prefer when they've got to make do with these sorts of items. Now while Ben is busy bashing skulls, another ghoul makes its way to the house to attack Barbara. Ben adds another hit to his kill streak and stabs a tire iron through its head. Though we don't see the impact, this idea of shoving weapons through heads would also become a staple of the genre, and it's something that becomes a reoccurring effect that gets more and more sophisticated throughout the decades. Now the ghoul who attacks Barbara is played by co-writer John Russo, who also plays another ghoul later in the film that is set on fire. He supposedly did the stunt because no one else was willing to do it, and yeah, I don't know if I'd be willing to set myself on fire in an indie film, but it worked great. Realizing the ghouls are closing in, Ben does what he can to lock down the farmhouse. He sets a ghoul alight outside and blocks the door while boarding up the windows. Ben then asks Barbara for help, and she goes about the house and firstly comes across a creepy music box. And then comes back with like probably the 2 smallest pieces of wood in the entire house. Yeah, just leave her, mate. Ben then puts things together and we can also see the calendar for December 1966, but mate, the movie is supposed to be April.
Boy, I really hope somebody got fired for that blunder.
But at least you couldn't see their breath in the graveyard. Living Dead superfans have even nailed down the exact date from Barbara's line about making the first day of summer the day the time changes, with the spring forward day for daylight savings in 1968 being April 28th. And you guys are nerds analysing all this stuff that in depth. Nerd! After bringing in her sticks, Ben then tells her how he first encountered the ghouls. He mentions how he saw a group of them chasing after a gasoline truck on fire while at a diner up the road. This group quickly killed everyone and he found himself surrounded by 50 or 60 ghouls. Ben also has a really chilling line here.
Still hear the man screaming.
Absolutely terrifying, and I wish we could have seen that, but it just gives us an idea of how formidable the ghouls are. Throughout every zombie movie from here on out, we often get survivors who the characters run into and they rattle off how they got there. It's always a tale of them being swarmed exactly like this and barely making it out, but hashtag Romero was the blueprint. This is also where we learn that they're afraid of fire, and this is why they backed away when Ben set the body on fire outside the house. Barbara then shares her story, but it's full of pointless details and a bit kind of rambly. In an interview, Adea said that they never actually had a working script and that she ad-libbed her speech here in one take. I think Ben's reaction to Barbara's babbling's just so funny as well, because you can see he's completely done trying to get anything useful out of her. As Barbara continues to scream about saving Johnny, she tries to run out of the house and slaps Ben, and he just fucking decks her, which yeah, at the time would have caused a lot of shit. This was the scene that Jones fought against, but Romero ultimately decided to keep it as the scene would have been the same for a white actor. Something he later regretted, but yeah, it's just one of those things that at the time got this movie a lot of attention. Laying her down, Ben then turns on the radio where they report there's an epidemic of mass murder being committed by an army of assassins. Hold on, that actually sounds like a pretty good movie idea. I would watch that and analyse it 50 years later. As more and more ghouls start approaching the house, Ben holds them back by setting a chair on fire and throwing it on the front porch. Small detail here as well, as Ben is making his torch to set the chair on fire, the window behind him's open and you can see it's still daytime.
Boy, I really hope somebody got fired for that blunder.
With the ghouls at bay for now though, Ben then takes a load off for a well-deserved smoke, and it's at this point he also finds the gun. As Barbara wakes up, he slips on her shoes like Cinderella and tries to console her. We then get another continuity error in that they're back off in the next scene. But at least you couldn't see their breath in April. Ben then moves the body from the top of the stairs, and this was actually Kira Shkon, aka the Cooper's daughter. You can even see her face for a split second, not only showing it is her in ghoul makeup, but also that the body has somehow regrown its face. People have also questioned why this corpse never came back to life, which unfortunately has never been answered. But I do think it's a valid question. Like, is there a certain amount of damage someone can take before they come back as a zombie? Haven't watched the remake for a couple of months now, so I'm not sure if they address it here. My memory is terrible, but if they do, we will be covering that. Either way, back with Barbara, she just continues to sit there, frozen by fear. The radio broadcast talks about how the ghouls are eating the flesh of their victims, and you might notice that the radio is just repeating the same message over and over again. This was also playing when Ben left just a moment ago. Now this makes me think that maybe even the station might be abandoned, or worse, zombies. And yeah, there's just no one out there that can help or guide the pair. Having the same line about the flesh repeating as we close in on Barbara also feels like the movie's taking us into her mind. Here, all she can focus on is the death that surrounds her, and it's a nightmarish loop which she can't escape from. Barbara then hears a noise coming from the basement, and two men come bursting out. They turn out to be locals who've been hiding out in the basement and waiting for the commotion to die down. This is also the first time I realised that no one in this movie introduces themselves or is introduced by another character. So I'll just go down the list now, so when we refer to them later, it makes it easier for you to listen. So, we have the Cooper family consisting of Harry, Helen and their daughter Karen, along with the young couple Tom and Judy. Never noticed this before watching this scene by scene, but I think it's a really cool and subtle detail that shows everyone's got their guard up. They're not introducing themselves, don't want to be friends, and this is ultimately why they fail. Harry also excuses not coming upstairs to help because he says he couldn't hear the screams. Ultimately, he was clearly just hiding, but he acts like a tough guy and wants to be the leader. I do think the argument is there as well, that he's just looking after his daughter, who he learns been quote-unquote injured. Which, if you've seen a zombie movie, mate, you know what that means. Think her turning into a zombie, you know, when you watch it now, it's very predictable it's going to happen, but I can imagine people at the time had no idea. It just wasn't established that a bite leads to you becoming a zombie, and at this point, you just think that the dead had come back to life. So yeah, another great zombie motif established here, and if you remember seeing this for the first time in the 60s, then let me know if that shocked you. Now Ben refuses to go to the basement as they would have no way to escape, and he tries to convince Harry that they're better off staying upstairs. They argue back and forth, but luckily young Tom becomes the voice of reason. He decides to help Ben reinforce the house despite Harry's insistence to retreat back to the basement. I also really like how Tom says,
"And we got windows to see what's going on outside. But down there with no windows."
Looking out the windows, the group then see that more ghouls have arrived and they begin breaking through the barrier before grabbing Ben. This obviously inspired the boards moment in Resident Evil 2, and it's become another staple of the genre. Young Tom then jumps into action, grabbing the knife Barbara left on the fridge. He then hacks away at one of the ghouls' hands, reaching through the window. Some more behind the scenes fun as well. The hand that Tom chops away at was made of clay and filled with chocolate syrup. Lovely that. In what's another staple of the genre, Ben shoots one of the ghouls repeatedly in the heart, but all it does is stagger back and return for the attack. He keeps coming for the window until Ben gets a headshot. This is our first indication that the ghouls can only be killed by damaging their brain, which is later explained by a TV reporter. I know this is also entry-level zombie lore, but we have to remember people literally had no idea what a zombie was before this. We then get a shot of all the numerous ghouls that now surround the house, and whoa, butt cheeks! It's hard to see, but the butt ghoul also has a mortuary tag on her wrist saying Smad Carol 40916. Romero reportedly insisted on there being a nude ghoul for authenticity, as it was logical that at least one of them would be naked. I think it's in this that you really just also see there's no dignity in being dead. The actors were really going all out, and this moment shows the dead don't really care what they look like. This is also one of our best looks at the ghoul in the film, and you can see how each of them are different with varying levels of decay. Marilyn Eastman, who plays Helen, did most of the makeup for the film, and she said that she didn't focus on the zombies being rotted completely, but rather took a prominent feature from each actor and then exaggerated it to make them feel much more unsettling. Eastman can also be seen as a ghoul herself eating a bug off a tree. Now while these days, you know, zombie movies got crazy special effects, they're all mutilated and grotesque and ugly as possible, I think there's something to be said about the simplicity of the ghoul. They realistically do look like people who've just recently died, and it kind of falls into the uncanny valley territory. A lot of modern zombie movies go over the top to make their zombies look decayed, and for as good as they can be, a lot of them look more like Halloween costumes than actual corpses. Here though, the ghouls look more or less like regular people, but slightly twisted. We all know to run away from a person missing half their face, but the familiarity of the ghoul makes them even more unsettling. I think it works fantastic as well, as we see they're a dark reflection of ourselves and what we will eventually become. Whereas some stuff in The Walking Dead, you'll never look like that, no matter how decayed you get. This scene was a massive shocker though, and what made it worse was that the kids could just walk up to this movie. There were no checks at the time, and you had families going to see it. Because of this, they actually created the MPAA off the back of this film, because it just took things to a whole different level. Back in the house, Ben puts Harry in his place and says he feels sorry for his daughter cause her dad's so stupid. Ben also says he's the boss of upstairs and they can be the boss of the basement. Fucking burn you there! Defeated, Harry scurries back to the basement like Smeagol to his cave, and Tom brings his girlfriend Judy up to join Ben and Barbara. In the basement, we then get a perspective change and meet Harry's wife Helen and their daughter Karen. She's got an injury, and Helen tells Harry that she thinks she might be unconscious from shock. Harry asks where she got the bandage, which is a subtle way to hide the bite. Again, you have to remember that without the concept of people becoming zombies through being bitten, there was no idea that this was going to happen. So while this seems obvious now, people at the time had no idea that she was going to turn into a ghoul. Harry then tries to gloat about how everyone's dumb for staying upstairs, but he's quickly brought back down when Helen learns that there's a radio and basically calls him an idiot just like Ben. Ben's found a TV as well, which pretty much seals the deal for him. I think in general, this movie also plays upon the subtext of how TV was seen as just turning people into mindless zombies. At the time, TV reporting was seen as the gospel and something that never got stuff wrong or lied. So everyone is just following what it says without question and all kind of huddling around it like a safety blanket. While the Coopers are in the basement as well, there's also a really noticeable cut when Helen and Harry are at the bottom of the stairs. This is actually the result of an 8-minute deleted scene that was cut from the film. From what I can gather, it was pretty much just them arguing again and kind of slowed the pace down by quite a bit. The budget was so tight that they couldn't afford enough film to shoot more than one take and basically just had to trust that Romero would get the best shots. There was also no way of checking the footage until post, which is why the cut's so noticeable. Before going back upstairs as well, I just want to quickly point out that the basement set wasn't actually part of the farmhouse. These scenes are all shot separately in the Image 10 production offices. The door leading to the basement in the house that we see in the movie is actually just a wall with a door frame built around it. But that's movie magic. Once upstairs, Helen then tries to talk to Barbara, but no one is home, and Harry continues to bitch and complain about how the upstairs is insecure. I think these parts of the movie really drag things out, and I did kind of struggle thinking of like, how to make this breakdown interesting throughout these bits. So I'm just constantly doing stupid shit. As the group gathers around the TV, we then learn from a news report that the ghouls are dead people who've come back to life to eat the living. The report also specifies that these are dead people who haven't been buried yet, which explains why many of them are not decayed. They even apparently had a corpse with all the limbs cut off at one point that woke up and still opened its mouth. The reporter then urges everyone to make their way to rescue stations, which are being protected by the National Guard. This is another staple of the genre, and you often have the base that the heroes consider going to that might provide some sanctuary. Things never quite get there though, it often doesn't work out, and this is Romero basically putting in place a blueprint for that. The news report also mentions how scientists are being consulted on the outbreak. This is where they mention the satellites with strange radiation, but it's left deliberately ambiguous. When speaking on what exactly made the zombies rise, Romero said the reason didn't matter, but rather how the characters responded to it. I thought it was sort of a punishment, something that was happening that was beyond our understanding. I felt it didn't matter at all. What should matter is that this extraordinary thing is happening and people are still arguing about upstairs, downstairs, who's the boss. They're still arguing about their own agendas instead of facing the problem. Something to point out here as well is that this is supposed to be in the middle of the night, but all of the footage from the broadcast is in broad daylight, with the reporter even referring to more information coming later this afternoon. Whoops, I'll not play the blunder clip, but at least you couldn't see their breath in April. Determining that the nearest station's only 17 miles away, Ben then proposes a plan for him and Tom to make their way to the gas pump on the farm while Harry covers them with Molotov cocktails from upstairs. Ben is clearly the only capable and level-headed person here, but why on earth would you choose Harry as your cover? Well, we find out why that was a bad idea. With their plan in place, Ben and Tom then make their way outside while Harry rains fire from above to hold back the ghouls. While Harry's throwing down the Molotov cocktails, we can see Ben's truck outside with its headlights fully intact, despite seeing the ghouls smash them up earlier in the film.
Boy, I really hope somebody got fired for that blunder.
It's back! Judy then stupidly refuses to leave her man and runs outside after them, which is when they ride off. We also get a quick cameo from the ghoul that attacked Barbara at the beginning of the movie when Ben burns him from the back of the truck. Once at the gas pump, the key of course doesn't work, so Ben shoots the lock and Tom spills gas everywhere trying to get back into the ride. As the fire begins to spread, Tom and Judy then try to get the truck away from the pump, but the fire's already spread too much and the truck explodes with them both inside. Rest in peace, Bozo. Now alone, Ben fights off the horde of ghouls and makes his way back to the house. They swarm him at first, and it's another one of those scenes where, though the hero's smarter and stronger, the zombie strength all comes from their numbers. He makes it to the door, however, that shit Harry's locked it and is clearly wrestling over whether to help. Fortunately, Ben's able to kick it open, and Harry finally finds at least one of his balls and comes to help Ben resecure the door. This isn't enough to gain forgiveness from Ben, however, he was who he chose. He then beats the shit out of him, and this kind of sets up the staple that people would often turn on each other in these sorts of stories. It also, of course, has the racial connotations and holds a lot of significance given the time period and Jones casting as Ben. Analysing the scene, horror noir author Dr. Robin explained how the contrast between Harry and the ghouls puts Ben between two different types of evil. Seeing the scene, Harry cowers inside the farmhouse, leaving Ben locked out to fight off the zombies. Here the film cleverly sandwiches its hero, Ben, between two different kinds of monsters, both possessing diminishing humanity. This, too, is a unique turn in the film, as a representation of monstrous difference typically functions to highlight the favourable, enlightened traits of white characters. Here the film reminds us that humans and monsters are not far apart, and indeed can be one and the same, but the scene's tension is heightened by its racial component. Back outside, the ghouls then help themselves to some extra crispy Tom and Judy, and I refer to this as the barbecue scene. They're absolutely chowing down with no expense of the movie's small budget being spared for every single gross slurping and chewing sound that one could imagine. While Psycho introduced audiences to brutal murder for the first time, Night of the Living Dead was one of the first to depict gore and violence to this level. And it really shocked people at the time. Given movies like Saw and stuff like that kind of made gore its own horror genre, the concept of people eating other people and showing that on screen was completely unheard of. One article in the Pittsburgh Press wrote that some of the scenes are so grisly it shook up even the hardiest of chiller thriller fans, and that it's a gourmet session for those followers of the macabre, grotesque situations. Sounds like Patrick Bateman reading a review there. After their failed escape, the survivors then argue back and forth about what to do, with it being revealed in this that the daughter's been bitten. Ben even calls out that the bites could be contagious, and it's here we get the first idea that the ghouls might be able to infect others, which obviously created the status quo for zombie films going forward. In Barbara's rambling, he also figures out that she's got a car, but like she says, Johnny has the keys. To make matters worse, the ghouls have once again surrounded the house. The group then tune into the news broadcast where they report that the levels of mysterious radiation is still rising and that dead bodies will continue to become flesh-eating ghouls. We then hear from Sheriff Conan McClelland, who has just taken out a group of ghouls and basically says they're no big deal and just shoot them in the head. This is further explained in a very, very scientific way by the anchor.
Kill the brain and you kill the ghoul.
Which my grandma always said works best. The news anchor also introduces McClelland as the sheriff, but the reporter later refers to him as Chief.
This one conducted by Sheriff Conan McClelland.
Chief McClellan, how's everything going?
Boy, I really hope somebody got fired for that blunder.
But at least you couldn't see the breath in April. The reporter here is played by Bill Cardille, aka Chilly Billy, who's playing himself and was a real news reporter and semi-celebrity in the 60s. Cardille was also the host of his own horror movie channel called Chiller Theatre. The sheriff then mentions that they'll be working through the night into the early morning, foreshadowing how they'll show up at the end of the film as the sun begins to rise on a new dawn of the dead. As the group watch the broadcast, the power then suddenly goes out and Harry legitimately shits his pants in fear. He tells Helen that they need to get the gun away from Ben, and even she's like, haven't you gotten your ass handed to you enough tonight? And that's not even a joke. Helen is thoroughly done with Harry and his shit. The ghouls then wage their final assault on the house, banging on the doors and throwing bricks through the window to break through the barricade. Ben and Helen then rush to hold them back, but Harry stands there frozen as Ben calls him to help. Harry then notices that Ben drops the rifle, and instead of helping his wife hold back the ghouls, Harry goes for the gun. He then points it at Ben and tells Helen to get back into the basement. However, Helen refuses to go with him, and Ben makes a move for the weapon. They tussle for a quick moment, but Ben overpowers Harry pretty easily, and he shoots him right in the stomach. Harry then falls back into the basement where he so desperately wanted to go. He then stumbles down the stairs until collapsing next to his daughter. Now, Romero wanted to have Harry die next to his daughter as a way of showing that he had at least some shred of decency in him. This would show he wanted to spend his dying moments with his child and wasn't as bad as he comes across in this unimaginable situation. As Harry bleeds out, Helen's then grabbed by the ghouls, seemingly spelling the end for the Coopers. The scene then finally wakes Barbara up from her trip to Neverland, and in a fit of rage she saves Helen. Helen then rushes downstairs to Karen, but finds that she's awoken as a zombie and is currently eating her dad, which is what he would have wanted. This is probably one of the most iconic scenes in the entire film, and the young girl zombie was put across every single poster ever for this film. Highlights how even the innocence of a child has been lost, and even children can fall victim to this fate. And yep, every time I see a movie kill a kid, I'm like, I respect it, because I know how much of a nightmare it can be to convince a movie studio that they need to kill the kid. This moment is just so iconic though that Zack Snyder would even kind of adapt it for the opening of his Dawn of the Dead remake, even though it belongs to night. And yes, we will do a breakdown on that as well. Karen slowly walks towards her pleading mother and then grabs a gardening shovel from the wall and stab, just goes to town. The scene is super brutal with the addition of Helen's screams wailing as the shovel impales her. The scene was shot by having the little girl stab a pillow off screen while a member of the crew threw chocolate syrup at the wall. The scenes were then looped with the sounds of Helen screaming to make it look like she was actually being stabbed, which sounds simple but is really effective on screen. The scream here and the soundscape in general though are just so mesmerizing, and it's one of those creative choices that just adds to the horror. The original version of the scene actually had Harry be the one who turned into a zombie and was eating Karen, but Romero decided to change it as he thought it would be just too disturbing. The trailer used in the scene was also purchased online and is now in a private collection. Back upstairs, Ben and Barbara are being overwhelmed by the ghouls as they desperately try and hold them back. While this would seem to be Barbara's moment of redemption, it's quickly shut down when she sees Johnny as a zombie. Clearly stupid and full of grief, she willingly runs to him and into the horde of ghouls and is then eaten. This then leaves Ben as the sole survivor. With everything gone to shit, Ben watches as the ghouls flood into the house and runs right into the Cooper's daughter. Couldn't find confirmation on this, but supposedly they didn't tell Jones that she was going to pop up behind him, and his scared reaction was genuine. Ben then grabs the rifle and locks himself in the basement, which is the exact place that he's been trying to avoid the entire movie. Harry then begins to awaken as a ghoul, and Ben shoots him and Helen to make sure they don't come back. It's him finally realizing another big rule in zombie films is that you also have to stop the dead in general. The Walking Dead, of course, had a big reveal that you come back no matter what, and if you died, you were gonna rise again. It's something I actually misremembered them inventing for the show, but nope, Romero had it right from the start, and hashtag Romero is the blueprint. This basement scene also nicely pays off Ben saying how the basement was a death trap. In the end, it became a literal death trap for the Coopers and has now trapped Ben as well. Hearing the ghouls trying to make their way through the door, Ben then grabs a rifle and prepares to make his last stand. Rather than showing it though, he survives the night, and we then fade into the break of dawn. Of the dead. Panning over the farmhouse, we see a helicopter arrive along with the rest of the town militia. They're currently clearing the field of ghouls, and then the police show up with dogs. As the police approach the farmhouse, Ben then hears the dog and the gunshots outside and realizes that help has finally arrived. Yay! Ben slowly makes his way out of the basement though to see what's going on, but Sheriff McClelland sees him from the window and orders his men to shoot him right between the eyes. And bam! And just like that, Ben is dead. Yep, after all that, Ben is shot and killed. The movie then ends with still photos of the militia and the police dragging Ben's body by metal meat hooks and then burning his corpse. It's an absolutely insane and devastatingly bleak ending, and it just leaves you stunned even after 50 years. Despite the script having the same thing happen to Ben if the character was white, the casting of Dwayne Jones, in addition to the time it was released, made this ending even more impactful than Romero ever intended. Released just 6 months after Martin Luther King was assassinated, Ben's death at the hands of the white mob was a very powerful image. Now obviously, you know, it was shot before that event happened, but you had the constant awareness of lynchings and racist attacks really making it at the forefront of the zeitgeist due to the civil rights movement. Being the heroic and sympathetic lead, Ben defied many of the common stereotypes of how black men were portrayed in film. So it was very progressive in many ways, but with his death at the hands of the white mob, that symbolized the dark reality of racism. Despite Ben being the one who tried to protect everyone throughout the film, it's the white characters who end the movie and take all the credit for defeating the ghouls. Talking about the impact of Ben's fate, co-author of the book Horror Noir, A History of Black Horror, Tanana Review recounts how this moment must have stunned a lot of audiences. Ben is shot without even a word, without even a thought. His whole story is erased, his heroism erased. Professor Robin Coleman further described how Ben's death was an important moment in film and cultural history, saying, whether Romero overtly understood or claims it, Night of the Living Dead is a brilliant piece of art, but also human and political history. The ending was also nearly changed as well, as Romero proposed having a happier one where Barbara comes out of her psychosis and saves her and Ben from the ghouls. But Jones actively fought against it. Speaking on the ending, Jones stated, I convinced George that the black community would rather see me dead than saved after all that had gone on in a corny and symbolically confusing way. The heroes never die in American movies. The jolt of that, and the double jolt of the hero being black, seemed like a double-barreled whammy. Now, while Romero claims these parallels are mostly accidental and a circumstance of the time, it's very clear that Jones was very much aware of how Ben would be seen on screen, and he was conscious of the implications that him being black would bring. I think in the end, them discriminately killing Ben for believing he's a ghoul speaks to how hate and misjudgment can often lead you down the wrong path. The mob was actively looking for ghouls and people they could shoot and kill, and thus they saw Ben that way even though he wasn't. Kinda speaks to how people who snap at decisions based on prejudice often make misjudgments, and I think it's a really harrowing way to end the film. Now, despite working with an almost non-existent budget and a cast entirely comprised of first-time actors, Night of the Living Dead became a massive success, made more than 250 times its budget, and became one of the most profitable movies of all time. In addition to its financial success, Living Dead created an entirely new genre of horror and brought the zombie into the cultural zeitgeist forever. Watching this movie in modern day, you know, you can just see literally millions of properties that were inspired by this film. Zombies have appeared in everything from movies to games, toys, TV shows, books, comics, everything, and this is literally all where it started. While we may have zombies who can run, survive as only ahead, and even go to high school, I think Romero's zombie still holds up today, and we have a certain level of familiar terror that the other more modern versions just lack. There's a reason that this film's still analysed today by complete sadaks, and there's so many minute things you can pick up and run with. I've even seen people suggest that maybe Johnny's gay based off a line that he doesn't see much use for church. Like, people have written massive things about that, and there's just so many tiny things in this film that aren't really fleshed out or are very vague, but you can build an entire thesis around it because there's so much going on beneath the surface. And that brings us to the end of the video, and I know that we've gone through a lot today, but if you take anything away from this, I think it's that if you have an idea that you're passionate about, just go and fucking do it. Who knows, you could change film history forever. But yeah, hopefully I've changed your appreciation for the film as well, and if you've liked it, please hit the thumbs up, and make sure you're locked in for our Dawn of the Dead breakdown coming very, very soon. If you want to follow us on Instagram as well, and keep up to date with all our updates, then make sure you check us out at Heavy Spoilers. Did you know as well that members of the channel also get early access to videos just like this one for just 99 cents a month? This video and American Psycho, The Wickerman and something else, we did a big poll where it was like, suggest what you guys want us to review, and it was for members only, and you guys voted and selected the videos, and that's how you got Mouth of Madness as well, because so many people left comments saying do Mouth of Madness even though it's losing, and I was like, I will do that for you guys. So yeah, thank you to everyone who signs up to that. Hopefully you enjoy the content, and with that out of the way, thanks for watching this video as well. I've been your host Paul, you've been the best, I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.